Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Africam show. Ooh, very exciting today because it is World Wildlife Day, everyone. Woohoo! Of course, we are all celebrating all the time, but it's always nice to raise more awareness on this day. And it's not just an arbitrary day. Well, I suppose in some sense it is, but it is an important day because um, it sort of marks, well, not sort of, it definitely marks the day or the anniversary of the CITES Convention. So that's the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, CITES, and it was initially signed in 1973, and that happened on the 3rd of March. So we celebrate that every day as a way to bring awareness and make sure that we're still thinking about the the ways in which animals are valued. And I think that's really important. So, woohoo for World Wildlife Day. And if you're joining us today when we're live and interactive and you can send through questions and comments, all the better. I can only think of one better way to celebrate World Wildlife Day, and that is to go out into the wilderness and appreciate all that's around you. And I think that every single one of us take that opportunity as often as we can. And if not, we always have the Africams to keep us engaged. Well, Jack DeVore says good morning from Chesapeake, Virginia. Jen Latz says good morning, everyone. Carolyn Quick says good morning from northern Minnesota. MG Leopard Spot says hi there, ready for the show with ice water and coffee, just waiting for the sun to come up. Well, I've been waiting for the sun the whole day, MG Leopard Spots, but it's been obscured by cloud. It seems that the summer has very quickly moved away and it's now chilly and quite rainy. But it's a good thing to have some rain before we head into the dry winter. Dear NC says, good morning, Trish and everyone. You've got a hot cup of coffee to enjoy the show with, and you're ready to bumble. Nice. I am too, and I couldn't be happier looking at some lovely elephants here in Botswana. They've been chilling. We were watching the cameras earlier, just before we started the show, and we've seen these elephants. There's three of them that are just taking it easy here. We saw some storms. Oh, you can still see it. You can see the heavy clouds, nice gray clouds right in front of us, and you can also see the rain in the distance there. Just taking it easy. Jan Powers says hi. Hi, Jan. Thanks for joining. And thank you as well, Bridget McKinney. April Owl says, good morning, everyone, from a cold Connecticut. Raspberry iced tea. Oh, April Owl, you and that raspberry iced tea that you didn't send the recipe for yet. But you are happy to be here, and we are happy that you are here. Kauru is on board too. Hi, Kauru. No milk for you today? Maybe you do have milk. Jean Gale says hello, here with hot coffee waiting for sunrise in a mountain valley near Seattle. So poetic. Love it. Jess is not normal. You say, hi all. It's been a while since I was able to make a live show. Well, we are so glad that you were able to come on board today, Jess. Because we are going to move through the different cameras as usual, and you get to ask whatever you like. I was having a bit of a think today about World Wildlife Day, and a lot of the time, and I don't know whether all of you will agree with me here, but sometimes it feels like we have so many of these days. We have a World Wildlife Day, World Penguin Day, World Elephant Day, World Reptile Day, all these different things, and it sort of feels like, well, what is it doing? Are these days helping? And in the most broad sense, or the sort of the broadest thing I can think of is awareness. The more we say, hey, it's World Penguin Day to somebody, then they think, oh, I haven't thought about a penguin in a year. So we bring wildlife to the forefront of people's minds on these days. So it's definitely not for nothing, even though we seem to have so many of them. And what I particularly like about World Wildlife Day today is that it marks that anniversary of the CITES Convention, which is something that has been part of my career for a long time. So when I was working in research before I started guiding and all of this sort of thing, I was working with sharks and rays. And I still remember the time when there was So the CITES Convention has different levels of protection for animals, and essentially it's a legal framework which countries have to then integrate into their own laws. So it's not a direct protection, but it requires countries to integrate these rules into their own laws. And I remember a time when mobulid rays, which is one of the species we were working with, or one of the groups we were working with, were CITES protected certain species, and every year a new species or a couple hundred new species might be protected by the law. And it was such an exciting thing for me and the scientists to know that, the species is now protected. And the CITES Convention has laws protecting about 40,000 different species of flora and fauna. So that definitely makes the anniversary of the signing of this convention an important one. Oh, Mindy. Hi, Mindy. You say you were up early watching the lunar eclipse. Mindy, I was literally just thinking about this, and I was reading about it earlier today because I wanted to know if it was visible from South Africa, and unfortunately, it was not. It would have happened or peaked somewhere around 1:30 in the afternoon for us, so no moon visible. But I hope it was spectacular. Please tell me how it went. I'm really glad that we had all these I can't even tell you what type of conversations these are. The conversations that are bigger than us and bigger than what we're looking at, like the moon and protection for 40,000 different species while looking at this beautiful, calm landscape. But let's get stuck right into it and head over to Stony Point. I mean, we are just talking, giving an example of World Penguin Day. So let's head over to Stony Point and get stuck into what's going on the cameras. Oh, hello, guys. They're in their little cave now. I really, really miss spending time with the penguins here, the African penguins here. Oh, a little kiss. And so Chris tells me that they're on their nest in the cave and they just got back here last week. I'm not so at Stony Point there are nests that are uh or nesting areas that are sort of built for them, not all of them. They have sort of plastic domes that you may have seen further on the banks, but I don't think we have a good view of those parts of Stony Point because they like to be covered. And so by selecting this cave, they're essentially doing the same thing that the artificial nests are doing for them. Now, yes, we did see a pair using the spot last year. Could it be the same pair? I reckon yes. It's not unusual. In fact, it's fairly common for birds to use the same nests they've used over the years, as in the same location. Smaller birds tend to build new nests all the time, but bigger birds, they need bigger nests, which means more investment, more energy spent. And so if they can go back and reuse similar spots, then that's useful. Now, on top of that, if they've had breeding success in a particular spot, a particular nest, then they're more likely to head back to that spot. And perfect timing as well, because they are generally moving into breed around this time anyway, over kind of like between March and June. So these guys, it's as if they saw the calendar and was like, oh, it's the 3rd of March. Let's head back to our spot. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't nest for the rest of the year. They certainly can. but most of the breeding is concentrated around this time, at least in South Africa. In Namibia, where there's another large colony, they breed further towards the end of the year. And once they do lay their eggs, that's another about month and a half of incubating before their chicks hatch. So you might be lucky. Of course, we're going to be lucky. Who am I kidding? We know how it goes here with the chicks. We have the time of our lives. Julian Thomas 19, you say, hi everyone, and yay for Stony Point. You'll be there in August. Oh my gosh. You're going to have a wonderful time. These penguins really rule the roost. And in Betty's Bay in general, which is where the Stony Point colony is based. They are all over the place. Walking the streets, sitting under cars, they are all over the place. And everyone is so conscious of them and so careful with them. I've seen penguins run out of people's yards. Who knows what they've been doing? So it's a really wonderful place to visit. And of course, Cape Nature do an excellent job of protecting this area and protecting these penguins, because a lot of the time when it comes to oh, hang on there. Dear NC, I just saw your comment. You saw them mating right outside the cave the other day, and it seemed like there was a certain energy that made it look like they might just mate now as well. Let's see. Julian, you're going to have an amazing time. I'm so happy for you. With the boardwalk and everything, it's just going to be, you're going to really, really love it. So Kathy S., you are asking, do penguins mate for life? Go back to the same nest each breeding season? Yes, they do. But so interestingly, I was just literally just today reading about the idea of mating for life, particularly in birds. And this is something that we come across a lot with birds because they create pair bonds. And those pair bonds are dependent on a few things. So there are, if we talk about species in general, not just birds and not specifically these penguins, I can tell you that if you look at books, the books will say, oh, they mate for life, or they're polygynous, or they have a different mate each breeding season. Or you might come across the word monogamous, which confused me a lot when I was just learning about animals and animal biology, because I assumed monogamous meant mate for life or pair bonded, but it doesn't. And that's where there's a lot of overlap or a confusion, because sometimes monogamous can mean they are pair bonded and they can mate for life. But monogamous means that they stay with a singular mate for the duration of the breeding season, and if they are involved, if both parents are involved in caring for the offspring, then they are together for that time too. But it doesn't mean that they are pair bonded for life. In fact, there are very, very, very few species that actually do mate for life. I know an albatross is one of those species that is sort of the crown in the jewel of, say, pair bondedness. A great example that everyone uses. But even with an albatross, there may come a time when they will not be with their mate anymore. So the reason that these things change, so there's basically two sides. One is, and if we're talking about birds that are monogamous, pair bonded, mate for life, we put them on one side. And then other birds that are not at all. So they'll go and mate with multiple mates, and this makes sense from the perspective of wanting to reproduce as much as possible. So the investment is going into producing as many clutches as possible with as much genetic variation as possible. And this is quite easy for the males in a species because they're not the ones that have to carry a fetus inside of them or lay eggs and take care of the nest. So they can go off and, mate with as many, spread their genetics as much as possible. But in that other group where we have monogamous pair bonded mate for life, how that happens, the duration of that happening depends on the availability of resources, whether your mate has actually returned, because there's could go out hunting and never return, in which case the penguin is, oh, saddle-billed stork. Gosh, so distracted. In which case the mate will, or the mate that's left behind has to find another. Now, those that, oh, it's a beautiful, beautiful male. You can see the wattle. Oh my goodness, this is my favorite stork, everyone. But anyway, long story short, I just got a bit too excited because I was actually just reading about this. Long story short, while they may be quoted as monogamous and oftentimes will mate for life, Kathy, the circumstances can change that. Whether there's sufficient resources, whether they've had a successful clutch, that's the biggest one. If they find a mate, don't have a successful clutch with that mate doesn't produce many eggs in the clutch, that could be cause for them to split up and find other mates as well. So when we say things like monogamous, mate for life, it's not a hard and fast rule, basically, is what I'm saying. I'm sorry it was so long-winded, I got really excited. And then we saw a saddle-bill stork, and then everything just kind of went crazy. Now, I know that you are here to learn about wildlife, but I will tell you that if you want to start painting birds, a saddle-bill stork is a really fun one to start with. I think it was one of the first birds I painted. Just a little aside there. But anyway, like I said, it's a beautiful male. You can see the wattle, the yellow wattle, just hanging underneath his chin there. Males have a darker eye than a female, and of course the females don't have the wattle. But you can see the saddle on the top of the bill there, the yellow little patch. Females have yellow eyes, and they match that patch beautifully. And I always am reminded of male and female with saddle-bill storks because I feel like, oh, their handbag matches their shoes or something silly like that. But the eye and the saddle match. And for the males, it's the wattle and the saddle that match. I always stop for saddle-bill storks when I get the opportunity to. I wish I could see one up close. I mean, like most big birds, they don't hardly ever come very close to you, but this one is not that much shorter than me. So I would like to stand next to it. But that's storks for you. Storks are tall birds. This one comes in at about 1.5 meters tall. Marabou stork comes in a little bit taller, about 1.3, I think. 1.53. So just 3 centimeters taller or so. And off it goes. Maybe in celebration of World Wildlife Day, you should paint the saddle-bill stork. Anyway, I am very interested in this quest, so I would love to go over to Ulusaba, one of our newer cams, to see this injury. Oh my goodness. What in the world? I've never ever seen something like this. And I trust that most of you have seen this crocodile on the cam and have obviously picked up on this injury. Am I looking at its leg? Is this like a growth on the upper part of its forelimbs? Cass said it's a hernia. Where's the hernia coming from? Oh, and thank you for that. I won't laugh, but I have heard his name is Bubbles. Oh, wait, hang on, what? I'm sorry, what? Um, I feel like somebody just showed me their rad party trick and I'm just absolutely confused. Oh my goodness, guy, I have no idea what's going on there. No, oh. Oof. I was about to say, wait, you can have some difficulty diving? So, let's start with what a hernia is. So, for a hernia to press out like this, there must be a weak spot in the tissue, like the muscle, the connective tissue, all that area must have a weak spot that is allowing fatty tissue, or in a really bad case, organs push out, instead of being kept contained within the body cavity. So I'm trying to figure out what organ could be on the side of the crocodile to push out in that way. Ooh. Oh, there's a lot to think about here because I'm also wondering. So, I really hope that if you haven't joined us for Wild Moments, that happens on Thursdays, please do, because I really hope that we'll get to talk about this. And at least by that time, I would maybe have researched what on earth this is. I've never ever seen anything like this on a crocodile. And also the fact that it seemed to I almost want to say it feels like it's connected to its lung because of the way it expanded and contracted. And the lungs of a crocodile are positioned near that area, like between the forelimbs. But that is, imagine having your lung being pushed out like that. And that just feels like too much. Exactly, Jan. Oh my word, wow. Like I have no idea. So in that front half of the body, where the forelimbs are, and from the forelimbs, say, to the jaw, there's the heart, the lungs, and the liver is just kind of in that line. I'd say maybe a touch behind. And then all the usual candidates, I mean, very much like ourselves, intestine, stomach, all of that is further down. So I don't think those are any of the culprits. But it doesn't really have to be an organ that's pushing out. It could just be some fatty tissue. But the movement of that wound, actually, this might be a good thing. So it seems that it's inflated now that that's in the water, right? And we know that crocodiles, they can't breathe underwater. They have to come up. So if we can somehow collect some data on whether the movement of the hernia is linked to the breath, that would be amazing. One problem this does present, I'm sure it presents a ton of problems for the crocodile, but the obvious one that we can see right now is that crocodiles rely on stealth when they're hunting. And that means that when they are submerged, you cannot see them. And if they need to pay attention to their surroundings, their eyes, ears, noses are all positioned on the very tops of their heads, so they can submerge the entirety of their body, essentially, and still have those senses giving them information, while still remaining somewhat hidden. But now this crocodile is completely hidden, so if prey was looking at it, it should think, oh, there's nothing in this water, and that the crocodile relies on that to ambush the prey. But that is sort of gone away now. Because if an impala comes on to the edge here and has a drink, it's going to be suspicious of this patch. So it's lost an element or some of the element of surprise. Remember that crocodiles can hold their breath for a long, long time. They can remain submerged for 10 minutes, 20 minutes. Some records even say up to 2 hours. But the holding of their breath is all linked to the slowing of the heart rate, slowing of metabolic processes, conserving oxygen to keep them submerged under the water. But typically we're looking at like a couple minutes, maybe 15, 30 minutes. They're not usually spending a ton of time just submerged for no reason. Jen, that you say it looked like a fleshy sack almost. I must agree, it did look like a fleshy sack, but then I'm wondering to myself, well, when has a hernia not looked like a fleshy sack, you know? Wow. I am so looking forward to discussing this. So we will definitely be looking at different clips from this crocodile, different views, angles, whatever we can get to give as much information as possible to you guys on Thursday during Wild Moments. So make sure that you're watching Wild Moments to get the full story. So I am definitely going to do some research, try to figure out what this could be. And we'll have a great old discussion about it during Wild Moments. And of course, because we're going to head over to Tembe to have a look at some elephants. But Kirst, will you please let me know to come back to this camera if this crocodile does pop up again so we can get a close look? Yeah. Oh, that was something. I have never seen something like that. And then when it did the whole bubble trick thing, I was gone. I do appreciate the name Bubbles, though. I once did some work with the aquarium in the Two Oceans Aquarium in Cape Town. They do a lot of turtle rescue and rehabilitation. And there was one turtle there whose name was Bob, which I thought was like quite cute for a turtle. And then I found out that his name was Bob because he had so much air trapped in him from the plastic he had been consuming that he couldn't dive and he used to just bob at the top of the tank. So many animals get their names like this. Anyway, here we are at Tembe. I probably took too long sending us over and now we don't. Oh, we do have an elephant. Is that an elephant? No, it's a bit small. Maybe a kudu? Oh, thank you. It's a Nyala. That makes more sense. Nyala territory, northern KZN. And we've got an impala as well. Bottom right. So peaceful. Ah, there we go. Hello, Nyala. I feel like Nyala, and for someone who's spent, I guess, my childhood in KZN, in the same province as Tembe is, I think I kind of took Nyalas for granted. They were one of those antelope that were fairly common to see, even if you weren't in a Big Five reserve. You could be in just a nature reserve, just a general nature reserve where you can go for walks and things like that, and you'd be able to see a Nyala or a Duiker. I once got very afraid of a Duiker. But it snuck up on us, and it was not a very safe area, and I thought it was a criminal, but it was just a Duiker. You end up taking these antelope for granted, and then you go to other areas, like where I spent a lot of my guiding time in the Sabi Sand, where you do find Nyala, but not a lot of them, because it's not Nyala. It's not like a stronghold of Nyala population. Nyalas love dense thickets, drainage systems. And in northern KwaZulu-Natal, you have a wonderful blend of sort of Afro-montane forest, coastal forest, as well as this typical savanna type of environment. So that means that there's quite a high density, floral density, which is just perfect for nyalas. Mindy, you say these are your favorite antelope? I think it's a good one. It's a good one to be your favorite. I like them as well. You find them around camps a lot. They definitely know how to pick safe spots. They like to stay near camps, sometimes coming into camps. But I think my favorite antelope is a gemsbok. I really, really do like gemsboks. Where are some ladies for you? Look at how vigilant it is. You can hear there's some movement, like human movement in the background, almost as if they're moving chairs on a deck or something like that, and that's getting his attention. Now those big ears are really important. You can see them moving around, attuning to any sort of unusual sound. Now, if you think of the environment that they like to be in, thick areas, dense areas, and then we think of another antelope that prefers that type of habitat, a kudu. Both nyalas and kudus have great big ears. Kudus bigger than nyalas, but both of them have nice big ears. And this makes sense for that habitat. Because as sound moves, and we know that sound is really important in the bush, animals could alarm call that will alert you to the presence of predators, birds, monkeys, other antelope, maybe other individuals in your herd. Maybe you'll actually hear a predator. So sound is extremely important, especially if you are not a predator, because you need to be extra, extra vigilant. So as sound moves through an environment, and sound is waves, right? So as it hits things, it bounces, it deflects, it can be absorbed or dissipated. And in an open plain, you can hear pretty well. There's nothing to intercept the sound as it moves from where you are, from where it originates to where you're going to receive it, your ears. But in a dense area, that sound is hitting all sorts of things. It's hitting the leaves, hitting the trunks, bouncing off different trees. And so it becomes more difficult to hear and more difficult to pinpoint where sound is coming from. In which case, bigger ears are going to be very helpful. This is not normal. You say it looks like he's got knee-high socks on. Yes, he is quite an old school boy. They always look like they have knee-high socks on. It's very, very sweet. So when Nyala lambs are very young, they look like females. And there's a point to that. So female and male Nyalas have a high level of sexual dimorphism, so they look very different. An animal with a low level of sexual dimorphism would be, for example, the penguins that we saw in Stony Point. Pretty much impossible to tell male from female unless you're doing genetic testing. And that's extreme because they don't even have male or female external genitalia. It's just a cloaca. So that's like no sexual dimorphism. But here with Nyalas, we have a really high level of sexual dimorphism. And the youngsters, whether they're male or female, they all look like the females. And it's only when those young males start to grow, start to sort of reach sexual maturity. So even at about 3 months, they still look like females. But then after 3 months, going onto 6 months, they start to take on male characteristics. And then you start to see these long socks start to form, and they look quite awkward. It almost looks like they're growing a beard, which of course they are. And their coats start to darken. And this is an important point because male nyalas, they are dominant individuals. And so if they can see young males from the time they're very little and they're still dependent on their mother, they will try to intimidate them, try to push them out of the herd, and sort of assume that they are competition. So it's a really neat way to make sure that all the youngsters up until the age of sexual maturity are considered, still babies. Not competition, can still be cared for, not a problem to anybody. And then once they start to take on those very male characteristics or external characteristics, the visual cues, then the large bull will start to push those now sexually mature males away from the group, which is an important thing because then they will need to go out and find their own females to mate with. So it's also a way of reducing inbreeding. Something gave him a bit of a fright, but back to it. Having a bit of a munch. Anyway, let us head over to Twin Can in Celinda and have a look at some hippos. Although I will say I would like to visit the croc again before we say goodbye. Wow. Just the sound. Just that sound. That's just a baby, Mama. Oh, look at this growth covering the waterhole. Wow. Whoa. That is a big hippo that just came through here. This is a very interesting interaction. I'm just gonna watch for a little while. The one on the right is clearly a babe. The other one could be an older youngster. Or it could be mum. But the one that just came in is definitely the biggest. Again, when we were talking about sexual dimorphism, yeah, that's mum. When we were talking about sexual dimorphism, there's very little in hippos also. Males have internal testes, so that's not going to help. But size can be, well, sort of a deciding factor. The problem is that you can't say, oh, females are smaller than males. If you're only looking at a female, it's still not going to help you. But the way that the medium-sized one went for the large individual tells me that that's probably mum defending the youngster. Mindy, you say that water looks nasty. Yeah, it does. That is a lot of algal growth. Now, hippos have quite an important role to play when it comes to algal growth in a waterhole because they are one of the few species that are continuously bringing nutrients from land into the water. They're eating on land, they're coming into the water, they're defecating, so they're bringing with them that nutrients, that bacteria. And it's a very fine balance. If there's too much of that bacteria in the water, it can consume all the oxygen and kill off everything else. If there's too little, there might be overgrowth of other bacteria. There is a fine balance. But at the moment now, it looks like... So I'm just having a look here. I'm a little confused about what's going on because this looks like the medium-sized hippo that I assumed might be mum that's kind of pushing the youngster into this branch. But now you are just... Never mind, you were just having a play. Oh, there it comes out on the other side. Oh, it looks like they were just playing together. All good. No need to panic. So this film, so it might be very, very, very small plants that are growing on the water because that is, we get some very, very tiny flowering plants. They kind of look like little four-leaf clovers that grow on the top of the water. So it might be that, or it's just an actual cyanobacteria film, so a film of bacterial growth. Either way, this is not great for the water because it is going to block sunlight, and basically everything that's trapped underneath is going to consume the oxygen without being able to produce any more because there's no sunlight coming in. So that can be very detrimental to the waterhole. But this is also where hippos play a really important role. As they're moving through, they're breaking this film. and they're allowing sunlight to pass. I know it seems like probably they're breaking very little compared to how much of this growth there is, but I guess it's sufficient. Either way, all these things do balance out. I think this is a good camera to watch. This one and the crocodile one. Now, the croc didn't appear again, so I decided we will just stick around here and see what's happening. But remember to join us for Wild Moments on Thursday, and we can have a real in-depth discussion about it. So also, keep watching that camera. If you see something interesting, let us know, and let us know on Thursday during Wild Moments. But now it is time to say goodbye. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, for your questions and your comments. I hope this was a valuable way to spend World Wildlife Day, and I will see you all on Thursday. Goodbye for now.